unstoppable kick-ass confidence. Are you ready?
Welcome to the Raw and Unscripted Show with Christopher Rausch, where we help you overcome your self-created crap without the self-help fluffy bullshit. Now please welcome our host, Christopher Rausch.
What's going on, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? Welcome to Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. You're at your place for the Raw and Unscripted Show with yours truly, Christopher Rausch, your no excuses coach, and I'm here to help you overcome your self-created crap without the self-help fluffy bullshit. Thank you guys for joining us, whether you're live or on the replay, whether you're watching us on the video cast or listening to us on the audio podcast. Thank you very much for being here with us tonight. Appreciate you guys. And we've got a great show lined up for you. And we're going to get started with that in just a few moments. But as always, I would just like to take a moment just to see how you guys are doing. What's going on in your life? How are things going here in January of 2023? And actually now February of 2023. It's pretty amazing how time flies by so fast. I'm always just looking at my show, this here, the Raw and Unscripted Show. We're already booking into June, ladies and gentlemen. So we got some exciting guests coming up. We've got some new things coming up. Actually, if you guys watch my Friday night show, The Unfiltered Experience, not last week, but the week before, we had my friend Patricia. She was on there co-hosting with me, and we interviewed somebody, and she had such a great time doing it. She's like, can we do more of that? And because I have a co-host on the Friday night show, usually I have Scott Goyette. I told her, I said, absolutely, we can do it. So she's reached out to a few people that she knows, and she's like, I kind of like this podcast thing, but I don't want to do it myself. And so we're going to have a couple of guests coming on in May. So put it on your calendar. I think it's May 2nd and May 9th. Both of those weeks, we're going to have Patricia Geigic here guest hosting with me, and we're going to be talking to some pretty influential people. So you definitely want to be here for that. And there's Patricia right now. See, I'm talking about you, and she's saying yes. So you guys listen on the audio podcast. So put it on your calendar, May 9th, May 2nd, and May 9th. Put that on your calendar. Those are going to be exceptional shows. Not like any of them are exceptional, right? We always have our good ones and our not so good ones, and that's okay. But appreciate you guys being here with us tonight. And as always, ask us questions. You know, this is a conversation between all of us. So I always tell my guests that it's us sitting in a bar or a coffee shop having a conversation, and everybody who is watching or listening is kind of eavesdropping in on the conversation. So they're like, what are those guys talking about? They sound like they got their shit together. It sounds like they're having a good conversation. Sounds like they're upbeat and they're positive and they're kicking ass in life. What are they doing? So you guys are those people. So feel free to ask us questions during this conversation tonight. Feel free to engage with us in the comments. Like if something you like or you disagree with, or you like or you agree with, whatever it might be, just let us know. And then we can just put you up here in the banner, and then the whole world can see what it is that you think. Isn't that exciting? Thank you for Patricia for being here. I also call her Patty. She's my dear, dear friend and wonderful mentor. We got Natalie in the house. What's up, Natalie? Thank you for being here. I always get confused because your name is Natalie, but your picture is the lead singer of Nickelback, Chad Kroeger. So thank you for being here. I appreciate you tuning in live. I know you just messaged me a little while ago and said you were binging on the Raw and Unscripted Show. So thank you for that. Appreciate it. Any episode that you particularly like, feel free to share that. Let people know what's going on here at the Raw and Unscripted Show, because I've been doing this now. This is actually episode number 199. Ooh, next week's my 200th episode. Who do I have next week? Who gets to be the lucky person on the 200th episode of the Raw and Unscripted Show? I'll tell you right now. I know you guys want me to tell you before I end the show, but let's see. Next week we have coming up Karen Gray. Actually, my guest tonight knows Karen Gray, and so that's going to be a fun conversation as well. So be sure to tune in for that. That's going to be our 200th episode. Can you believe that? Yes, I actually started this January 2019. I started this show a week before my major back surgery, and God is my witness. I'm sitting here in an excruciating amount of pain. Unfortunately, the last couple of days were a little bit better. I know you guys follow me on social. Today has been hell. And so fortunately, thankfully, unfortunately, unthankfully, I guess I have an MRI scheduled for Friday in the morning. So we're going to see what's going to be going on with that. So hopefully I don't need any more surgery, because that was hell. But my point is that we started the show here, and then I came back after my surgery. I said I wanted to start the show before my surgery, and then I came back after my surgery and kind of walked you guys through that process. And that was actually before this was a video podcast. So interesting times. I decided to do a video podcast, and I decided to do it live because I just love the excitement. I love the adrenaline. I love having people part of the conversation and being able to have a good time. And Natalie says she's listening to, I guess, show number 197. So thank you for that. I got Robert in the house. Says good evening, Christopher, Patricia, and Natalie. Thank you for being here. We got Nicole Young in the house. She says hello, good evening. and she's sending me prayers. You get answers. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty stubborn and I'm pretty belligerent. When I teach people how to be unstoppable, it's for me, it's to a fault. Sometimes I don't know when to stop. So my doctor actually encouraged me to be very careful, because if there, and this is for your own benefit, if you ever have back pain or back issues, if your L5S1, which is your bottom disc that goes to your coccyx right below there, if that disc herniates and the nerves that are coming out of the foraminal canal get pinched, you could actually lose control of your bowels and your bladder. And if that happens, you have to go to the emergency room right away, because if they don't fix it, it could lead to permanent damage or permanent paralysis of your legs. So that's not so much fun. We don't appreciate that. We don't want to definitely have that. But at any rate, there's just a little update on my back. All things being equal, we're here at the Raw and Unscripted show. And yeah, we're going to have a good time tonight. And so my guest tonight, I've had the opportunity to meet with her. We are a part of a group together on LinkedIn where we help support one another's posts and everything. And she's an exceptional leader. She has an amazing story, and we're going to be talking tonight a lot about the business world and how we, either as staff or as leaders or as business owners, can adapt and change with everything that's going on in this post-pandemic world. I call it a post-pandemic world. What leadership looks like, what our roles as staff and support personnel look like, what our roles as entrepreneurs and just the lay people. We're going to be talking all things mindset, because that's what we do here on the Raw and Unscripted show. So please help me welcome to the Raw and Unscripted show, Miss Lisa Coletta. Lisa, what's going on, dear? How are you doing today?
Hello there. I'm well, thank you. Sorry, I was on mute for a moment there, Chris. I'm doing well. I'm sorry to hear about your back. I hope they get to the bottom of all of that.
Yeah, they will. I mean, I'm pretty sure I need surgery. They wanted to do surgery 6 months after my first surgery, and I told them, hell no. I told them to get bent. I wasn't going to do it. And they said, well, live in pain. And I said, I will. And then now the pain's gotten worse. So I'm guessing I just don't want to do that. I don't know if you ever had back surgery, but it's definitely not enjoyable.
Look, no, I fortunately haven't had to experience that firsthand, but I do know that once something happens to your back, you really need to focus carefully on it to make sure that you're doing the right thing all the time. Otherwise, it does catch up with you, no doubt.
Yeah. So do you think doing a 5K bubble run last weekend was a bad idea? I did it.
Were you in the bubble while you did it? No.
No, actually, no. It was actually bubbles. Like it was like more of a kids thing. So you went through these.
Enjoying bubbles.
It was really cool. You went through these checkpoints, if you will, and you just went through a whole ton of bubbles, like bubbles up to your face and everything.
Oh, right. Yeah. Look, I think it would have been better if you were in a bubble, but short answer, no, Chris. I don't know that was necessarily the best decision for you, but did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I did. I had a great time. My son had a great time. My wife had a great time.
There you go.
And I walked.
It was worth it.
I walked through it. I limped through it, but yeah, unstoppable, baby.
Of course you are. It's look, there's always consequences for our actions and our inactions, isn't there? So I think you made the right decision, Chris. Spend quality time with your family.
Yes.
It's important. Absolutely.
Thank you, Lisa.
My pleasure.
And you're coming to us from Australia, all the way from the land down under.
I am. It's 2:00 in the afternoon here in Sydney. Evening time there for you.
7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time.
There you go. Yep. Sydney. And given that it's the middle of summer, we're actually having a dreary old wet day today, which is a bit unusual for us. We've been having sensational weather over the last couple of weeks, but today is a bit wet, bit damp. But, can't control the weather, so all good, all good.
Well, I will bring you the sunshine through this broadcast, so thank you for being here. Appreciate it. We got Nicole sitting here chiming in. She says, our biggest strength can also be our weakness. LOL.
Damn
Absolutely. So for you, Miss Lisa, what got you started in your own particular work and your practice as a governance specialist in leadership in corporate and trying to shift things around for people?
Oh, great question. So how did I get here? I have been working in the governance space for about 20 or so years, and I was finding the organizations I was in, and I'm sure many of you might choose to jump into LinkedIn and have a look at my background and my experience. I was in a lot of corporate environments, and I learned a lot. I had great mentors in the environment I was in, but I got to tell you, I put up with a lot of corporate bullshit. Oh, am I allowed to swear, Chris?
This is the Raw and Unscripted show, baby. You can swear all you want.
Fantastic. I was putting up with being real. Being real. Let me be real, folks. Yep. I put up with far more corporate BS than I ever should have. And because of the environments I was in environments where you had to go along to get along, and you were there because you had to be, and also a little bit because you wanted to be as well. So I was really fortunate. I was in some great environments and some not so great environments. But I found that this thing that I do called governance was being corrupted by individuals. And the context around that is basically they were using the opportunity for them to use power and authority in a way for good, but also in a way for evil.
Yeah.
And when I say in a way for evil, I mean they were doing stuff to basically feed their own egos and serve themselves. And as a result, governance got a really bad rap. It was really hard slog selling governance in these organizations, Chris, because everyone thought governance was the problem, but it wasn't the problem. It was the leaders and their application of governance that was the problem. And so about 4 or so years ago, I was in an environment, in a government department, in fact, within state government here in New South Wales and Sydney. And I got the opportunity, my role became redundant. And it was a really great opportunity for me to sit back and say to myself, Lisa, what do you want to do? Do you want to go into another environment and do your best to support them around governance, be an employee, or is it time for you to actually set up for yourself and go out there and truly practice what you preach? And that's what I chose to do. I took my little bit of redundancy dollars and I started the Governance Collective. And so I basically go into organizations, Chris, and I clean up all that corporate bullshit. And yeah, so that's what I do. And I have lots of real conversations with leaders. And I guess one of the things I found, if you don't mind me sharing, is that this governance stuff, the misuse of this governance stuff tends to happen for 3 reasons.
Yeah.
Firstly, leaders put governance in place. They put rules in place around how to make decisions and how things have to work and operate. Then they leave it. They don't maintain it. The world changes. Everyone moves on, but the governance stays, and it really pisses people off working in environments like that. So that's the first reason. The second reason why it tends to play out is because some leaders go off on really fancy smancy training courses about what great governance looks like for big high-end, ASX listed organizations or, really listed companies. And they come back to their environments and they overkill governance so heavily because they think that their organizations are the same as the ones that they were taught about.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is unfortunate. And of course, the third one, which I want to talk about today with you, is leaders are misusing their power and authority, and they're using the governance frameworks for their own personal means. And it sucks working in environments like that because how people feel is really, really important. And these leaders typically, they don't check in and see how people are feeling. So that's kind of the main reasons why I find governance is applied poorly, and part of the reason why I started on my own.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I think we had talked about this before. I was in corporate for many, many years, over a couple of decades, and then left that in November of 2019 to do this. I sat there and took same thing. I took a step back and was like, do I really want to go back and do all that stuff and work my ass off to support somebody else's goals and be a part of the KPIs and everything else? Because I too, like yourself, was made redundant. And I was like, after 26 years, really? That's the way you're going to treat me? It was pretty ridiculous. But one of the things that I really wanted to key on with you now is the leadership. I've always been fascinated by leadership. I've got a master's degree in leadership. Is the change in the corporate dynamic space now since COVID, right? So 2019 to now, there's been so many shifts in the way we do business and leadership and generational differences and the quiet quitting and everything else. What are some things that you're seeing as far as issues and things that people are addressing in the corporate space now with regards to leadership? And also, before we answer that one, just for everybody's sake, what is governance? Because I know when I first heard it, before I knew you, it sounded like the government was it sounded like
government,
the ruler was going to come down. It was like it sounds intimidating. So talk to us about what governance is, and then
let me define it first, and I'll define it in my way. There's lots of really formal, fancy ways of defining it. Governance, when you're looking in an organization, is roles and accountabilities. It's defining, approving and applying lines of accountability in organizations.
Nice.
And the ways companies do that is through writing policy. For example, you might have a finance policy around who can spend what. In my world, we call that a delegations policy. It's a authority and delegations policy that outlines what roles can spend what money in what way and for what purpose. They are lines of accountability around spending money. And so governance is the application of those lines of accountability being formalized. They're produced, they're defined, they're drawn up and they're managed on an ongoing basis. Great companies have governing frameworks, different kinds of frameworks that form an ecosystem. In other words, an intricate sort of, I guess, not complicated. Yeah, an intricate culture, exactly right, where all of these different frameworks talk to each other and they share insights and perspectives around different components of what's happening in the business. And an example of that might be risk, how they manage risk, and how risk informs how we deliver our business plans, how we control and manage through writing policies and procedures and all that kind of thing. So governance has an internal aspect to it. It also has an external aspect to it around compliance, how we comply with all the regulatory stuff that we have to do. And so to, I guess, link onto your question about post-pandemic and governance and how this all matters now more than ever, I'm finding in organizations I'm working in that governance is really quite critical. We are no longer focusing on just complying, just ticking the box and doing what we have to do. And the reason why is because more and more businesses are recognizing that when they've got these great defined lines in place, the insights they're getting informs their decision making.
Mm-hmm.
So the quality of everyone's decisions, all the leaders' decisions in the business are much better, and they're more confident about their decision making because their governance frameworks actually inform them around decisions.
Nice.
It's nice, hey? And the other thing too, of course, is that great governance forces transparency and accountability.
Ooh, leaders don't like that.
Transparency and accountability, right? So when you've got transparency and accountability, what that means is that you've got a more ethical culture. Well, at least it drives the need for a more ethical culture because there's nowhere to run and nowhere to hide, right? So things are so open and transparent. Ultimately, it means great leaders can make great decisions that are ethical and transparent for the right reasons to move them towards their goals. And that's really what it comes back to. So I'm finding more and more post-pandemic that organizations are recognizing, great leaders are recognizing that this governance stuff, when it's done well and it's done properly and it's done in a right-sized way, it's not all that BS and all that crap that, we're not maintaining and we're overkilling and all the rest of it, is really, really beneficial, and it contributes to the bottom line because it enables us to much, much more easily and agilely move towards our goals. And that's what it comes back to. So there's been quite a shift around it. And it also means that leaders are equipping themselves to be better informed around how to be a great leader and how to oversight effectively too. So that's what seems to be happening.
Well, it seems, I love what you said. And the thing I remember about being in corporate leadership before, because I've heard from a lot of my friends, things have really drastically shifted since the pandemic and everything, the quiet quitting and everything else, is that the leadership generally wants everybody else to be held accountable, but they don't want that upwards accountability. What do you do when you face with that? When you find that you have a client where they want all the rules to be applied to everybody else, but when it's really supposed to be applied to C-suite, that's the most important factor. What do you do when you have to deal with that?
So real conversations have to be had. And you look, Robert, one of your callers, Robert, has actually said, yes, they're seduced by the power. Most absolutely. Those real conversations really do come back to what do they feel their role is as a leader? What does leadership mean to them? Is it about the power, or is it about recognizing that part of their job is to coach, to guide, and to lead?
Yeah.
And these conversations are really, really sometimes mirror holding. Let me hold the mirror up for you and understand what everyone else is experiencing here. Because while I'm a corporate governance professional, et cetera, I really care about people's feelings. How do people feel about the environment you're creating? Because how people feel drives their behaviors.
Yes.
And if you want people to move towards the goals that you're defining, how they feel should be a really big factor for you as well.
You would think.
You would think, right? And because leaders, let's be realistic, I hold the mirror up in front of the leaders to see themselves. Their behavior is mirrored by others. They set the tone. Leaders set the tone for how everyone should be behaving across the business. And that naturally actually happens, regardless of whether they're doing the right thing or the wrong thing. Yeah. And I'll be the first to admit, early in my leadership journey, I was around leaders. I was mirroring leaders' behavior because I had to go along to get along, even though I knew in myself I wasn't really aligned with what they were doing, but I felt I had to, and I didn't feel I had a choice. And so, once you know better, you do better.
Yes.
So the first thing I like to do is those leaders that are actually open to having a conversation, we have one. What does it feel
honest, like fully honest, like transparent, like let's get to the shit right now.
Yeah. Absolutely, because I can go in and produce the most amazing frameworks and policy, and we can have a great ethical culture. We can define values and behaviors. We can do all these amazing things. But if the leader has got a do as I say, not as I do mentality, all of that's not going to stick, because this governance stuff that I do, yes, it's about the policies and procedures and the documentation, but it's also about the culture and the mindsets of leaders.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a complete package, and I'm only successful when there's real commitment by the leadership team in recognizing that it's not just about you telling them what they've got to do. It's actually more about I've actually got to walk the walk and talk the talk, because they are taking their cues around what's acceptable and what's not acceptable from me, the leader. Mm-hmm. So we have those conversations.
I love that. I don't know if I told you this before when we were talking, but when I was working in corporate, one of the side hustles that I had as a professional speaker was doing corporate trainings. And one of the things that I did on was generational differences. We had at that point, we had silence, baby boomers, Gen X, Gen Ys. The Gen Zs were just being thought of. And there was so many intricacies in having the multiple generations working side by side. I just saw a report recently done, and I knew this was coming up. The baby boomers were retiring at such a fast age that the Gen Xers, the baby boomer generation was like this, Gen X generation's like this as far as quantity. So there was like a gap in what was going to be filled for leadership by the Gen X into the baby boomers. And now we have the Gen Zs and the Gen Ys in there. Talk to us about that difference in the leadership style between a baby boomer and a Gen Xer, perhaps, versus the new generation of workers and leaders.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And it's really interesting too, because for me, the younger generation, from an educational standpoint, have a richness of their knowledge that really needs to permeate through the business. And sometimes when those Gen Xers and those baby boomers are really quite stagnant at those higher levels, the Gen Ys don't actually get a voice.
Yeah.
And it's actually really disappointing, because the Gen Ys actually have really valuable insights and perspectives that are valuable to the business if they actually open up and at least undertake some pulse checks around where things are at, and enable them to share their insights and their perspectives. These great cultures and these great environments, in my experience, have a way for everyone to have a voice in some way or in some form. And it doesn't necessarily mean that voice needs to be moderated or regulated so that they're only saying all the good positive things. It's more about having a culture of having the real conversations and actually working through things, and recognizing that 1 + 1 = 3. I don't know if you've heard that concept before, 1 + 1 = 3, but that's where, Chris, you've got some ideas and some experience, and I've got some ideas and experience. And when we come together, we actually create something new from both of our bases. Yeah. And all of a sudden there's your stuff, there's my stuff, and there's this new bit that's actually been leveraging, and it's leveraged from your knowledge and my knowledge. And that's great. Organizations create environments where they can make 1 + 1 = 3, because they're leveraging, utilizing their skill sets much more effectively that way. So I'm totally with you. Would you like an example of how a company can do that? Like how do you actually hear from your Gen Ys? Would you like something like that?
Yeah, actually that was going to be one of my next questions. I have so many different questions popping up into my brain, because one of the things that I had difficulty in when I was in corporate was getting people to be honest in their evaluation of what leadership was doing, what the company was doing. Everybody was scared to death that they were going to be found out if they told the truth. So much so we had one of the things that I advocated for in my role. I was in operations, but I worked closely with the human resources staff. Mm-hmm. And so I was all about the morale. I got my master's degree in organizational management. So it was effectiveness, all that stuff. And I went to the HR people and I said, let's enter this contest. It was actually from the Orange County Register, as a local newspaper, and they had the best places to work for contest. And so I went to management, I went to my boss, and I said, what do you guys think about entering this? Let's enter this. And then the staff can submit what their survey responses are. And then as a management team, every single management meeting every month, we'll take one of those aspects that they're not happy with, and we can work on it as a team to implement some solutions. And then each year raise the place that we have in the contest. But even that, honestly, Lisa, went back to my staff and we went around the whole building and said, okay, it's completely anonymous. And still people trusted me. They would tell me off the record, like, Chris, I'm not going to tell the honest truth because I feel like they can track my IP address. I feel like they're going to, like, they based it on department, and my department has 3 people in it. So they're going to say, okay, the operations team, so one of those 3 people doesn't like this. Talk to us about that. And give us an example as well, because I know that's one of the biggest obstacles that I hear from my leadership friends is getting that honest feedback. Everybody's scared shitless to be honest.
Look, I totally get it. And I can understand why, right? Because all of us in different ways have had the experience where we did speak up.
Oh, yeah.
We were found out, and there were really shitty consequences. And, they ask for our opinion, but they don't actually really want to hear it. What they want to hear is how great they're doing and that everything's great and fine. And if you want that, then why ask us? I totally get it. I totally understand. One of the things that I find is really useful, especially for those of you out there that actually own some of these governance frameworks I'm talking about. You might own the HR framework or the recruitment framework. You might own the risk framework, whatever else that, you might own a process within the organization that enable you to do this. What I really love doing is organizing for pulse checks.
Yeah.
And this pulse check, it's a survey, but I actually in one organization, because there was such a big fear over what if I say something and then I'm telling the truth, but it's wrong.
Yeah.
Or it's wrong and bad from a management standpoint because they don't want those concerns out there, and I don't want to close down people's responses. People need to understand what's happening, but I don't want to feed the rumor mill around crap either. So what I did was I set up a pulse check process, and from a, purist governance standpoint, I got my audit and risk committee to sponsor it.
Oh, wow.
So the chair of the audit and risk committee actually asked me, even though I recommended that he do this, could you please, I'd like to put a pulse check process in place because the audit and risk committee would love to understand what the emerging issues and risks are in the business so that we can be on the front foot in managing them. And so to provide some level of comfort and safety, it's confidential. And I've asked Lisa Coletta to set up some kiosks throughout the business. It's basically a computer that's left turned on with the survey available, and individuals any time of the day and night could sit on that kiosk and put in their feedback.
Ooh, I like that.
What it meant was that there was no IP address fear. There was no naming fear. There was no, I saw Lisa sitting there, so that must have been her response fear.
Right.
And what we actually found from a response standpoint, and we were doing this monthly because I was basically the steward of the risk framework. So I was actually gathering the data and turning it into really meaningful information for the audit committee to consider against the organization's strategic risks. These are the top risks for the business. Chris, can I tell you what we found? I've got goosebumps even now. Was absolutely incredible. People at these amazing employees at the front of our customer processes were sharing insights and perspectives around their experiences that we'd never heard of before.
Wow, I'm not surprised.
And it's one of those things where for those of you that are risk management junkies, it's those unknown unknowns that we were really worried about. Mm-hmm. And they became known unknowns. So what we actually found was that over time, I was able to start categorizing and sort of said, what do you think the top 5 issues are in the business? And they could pick from some drop downs because we were starting to get some consistent data every month. And then we'd say, is there anything we've missed? And they would be giving us these absolute gifts of content around what we could do better, what were current issues in the environment, what were concerns. And we also found over time too, we had a couple of incidences where people were too scared to speak up around fraud and corruption matters, and they were able to speak up through that process. Even though we had an anonymous helpline that no one trusted, they still went to this process instead. So enabling people to share their feelings is important because, again, it's a pulse check. This is how people are feeling right now. If we had a safety incident in our business people were a bit concerned about our safety equipment. It's pretty old. We need to upgrade it. That is a really important aspect of people's lives and their well-being. Yes, we should be spending money on this, help with the decisions. Those kind of things work really well, I found. And it makes people feel like they're being heard because they are being heard and published. This is the top 5 things everyone said. So as part of next month's survey was the results of last month's, the top things that everyone said. And we also started to feed in, what is management doing about it?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's one thing to give you all this free advice and it's another thing to go, thank you. and then go, okay, well, what do we do with it? And we needed
Exactly.
to, and because it was part of the board process, we needed to get really great runs on the board to show that we're actually genuinely doing something about it. So yes, that's how it worked. And it worked.
Yeah. And how do you have that enforceability? I mean, it's one thing to come in there and say, okay, we're going to have this governance expert come in and change everything around. We're going to follow the rules and everything else, and it all sounds great on paper, and they want to do that. But sometimes we find in the backside that's some of the stuff is not supported and long lasting. What are some things that staff members can do on their own to help support those initiatives and keep people held accountable?
Well, there's a couple of things, and the accountable is exactly the point. With these processes, whenever boards and executives start putting these types of initiatives in place, there needs to be really great clarity on who's accountable and who's responsible.
Yeah.
So those words, accountable and responsible, as you may know, are two different words. They mean two different things. Accountability means that the buck stops with one person and one role. And responsibility means that multiple people might be responsible for delivering aspects of that. And so the first thing we did was get the right leaders with the right accountability and the right authority to have the power to do something about it. Because typically they don't do it because they all feel it's too hard and I don't have the delegations and bloody, 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 and all that kind of thing. So that there's that side of it, first of all. As staff members and as team members, part of the conversation when you're responding to these types of things is to actually say, I don't believe anything's being done about any of this stuff. I don't feel my contribution to this survey is actually being taken seriously.
Mm-hmm.
If enough people actually stand up and share how they feel around that, statistically, as a leader, I've got to stand back and go, 30% of the people that we surveyed this month are saying we're doing nothing with this data. That's an issue.
That is a huge issue.
And then I've got the board committee saying, well, Lisa, what do we do about this? And of course, as a good leader, I'm going to stand back and say, well, how about we ask for some volunteers? We've got all these projects coming up. We've got these great team members out there that clearly want things to change. Are they willing to put in a little bit of time to support it? And it doesn't matter what level of the business you're in or what division or whatever else.
Yeah.
If people are willing to put some time in, and it's a great opportunity for them to showcase their skills and their knowledge with the board and with senior leaders.
Yep.
So I've never found it being an issue, Chris, to find great volunteers. As long as I open it up and say, you're passionate about this, we need you. We need you.
Mm-hmm.
Just because they're a senior leader doesn't necessarily mean that they're the right person to deliver these outcomes.
Yeah, I love that. You're making me think about all these different things in my corporate life that I tried to let go of, but it's a lot similar to what I did because my staff would sit there and complain about certain different things. And I had a huge staff. I had one of the largest groups in the company. And so what I would do is I would pull everybody together and go, what are your ideas? What are the problems? Let's state the problems. What are your expectations about the problems? What are your potential solutions of the problems? And do you want to be involved in the implementation of those problems or the solutions? Because oftentimes they just have this narrow scope of what it is. Why can't we just do this? Why can't we just do this? So my idea was like, let's get them involved in this process so they can see from stem to stern exactly what's involved, so they can go back and tell their friends like, oh my God, I thought they just needed to get different coffee, but there's this, that, and the other thing that we need to consider. There's health reasons, there's all these different things. So it empowered these people to be more aware of the totality of the situation and then be involved in those solutions. And that gained them exposure with senior management and promotion opportunities within themselves. But the biggest thing that I found, Lisa, was a lot of them didn't want to be a part of the solution process anymore. They're like, oh my God, I didn't realize how cumbersome it was and the legalities and this, that, and the other thing. Talk to us about the differences now in those generations. Like now I'm hearing so many different things about Gen Z. Are they standing up and being more vocal and holding people more accountable?
Look, it's really interesting, and you're really great. You're raising incredibly great points, right? Because it's one thing to expect them to do it, but it's another thing to actually step up and do it yourself. I've been quite a few. Yeah, you learn, right? And quite a few organizations actually give people the opportunity to step up and give it a go. Yeah. And you have people saying, I wouldn't be a general manager I wouldn't be a director or a president for all the money in the world in this place. I tell you, it's all just too hard. And I guess it's one of those things too, where when it comes to these Gen Ys and the Gen Zs, their approach and their wiring is just so different. I'm a Gen X. I'm pretty sure you're a Gen X as well, right? And I've got Gen Ys and Gen Zs in my household, my children, my young adults, should I say. They're wired so incredibly different. And I think it's one of those things where they have a much better inner knowing about themselves and who they are, Chris, than what we were when we grew up. I mean, I've got a 15-year-old who already knows what she wants to do and who she wants to be.
What do you attribute that to? I mean, since you have personal experience, what do you attribute that awakening to? I mean, there's obviously access to information and everything, but why is this younger generation seem so bold and dynamic in the way they're approaching life?
Look, I think that there's 15's not young anymore. And I'm not sure what happened, because when I was 15, I didn't even know which way was up. My biggest issue was how my hair looked and what I was wearing to school and all this kind of stuff. It's a very, very different world now. And you're right, the level of information they have access to enables them to basically shop for ideas about who they are. Because when they're online, they're actually looking for and testing likeness, because like attracts like.
Yep.
So they're actually navigating through and going, I am kind of like them, but not like them. I love music, but I can't sing, but I do like this, and I don't do that, or I don't like that. And so through this process, I think, of exploration and discovery and the amount of information that's out there, as well as the level of space they have now to really, because our parenting styles were different to the parents we had. I don't know about yourself, but I know I'm not my mother and I'm not my father. I'm very, very
I'm not my
mother. And we've actually proactively done that because we've experienced a certain type of environment, and we've either gone, I'm going to take the best bits of that, or I'm going to actually create one that I feel is going to serve my environment and who I am better. I've created a space where I've done my best to, dare I say, put really great governance into my kids' heads. Yeah. And that is, I've taught them, So I've taught them a couple of things, or I like to think I've taught them a couple of things. I like to think that I taught them about how to make great decisions.
Yeah. Talk to us about that, components of that. That's actually one of my questions, was how do we make better decisions and how do we problem solve more effectively?
Look, and I can tell you that I've actually had decision-making. I've been giving my kids decision-making training for a really long time. And I'll give you a real example, okay? I was and am a working mother, and my children used to go to childcare before they were in school. They went to prep school and preschool.
Yep. That's what my son did.
Both my son and my daughter both did it. And as you know, once they went into school, they, went through the process of, navigating a little bit more with less of my support. They used to want to take toys to school. They would pick up this really expensive toy. Cabbage Patch Kids, for some reason, was my daughter's favorite thing. And they were quite expensive. Like for us, they were about 70 or 80 Australian dollars, which is not that much US, I know, because Australian dollars pretty crap. But it was about $80. It's a bit of money, it wasn't a cheap toy. Yeah. She'd want to take her most favorite Cabbage Patch to school, and her name's Amelia. And I'd say to little Amelia, imagine this blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl looking at me going, I'm taking my toy to school. And I'd say, Amelia, what are the rules about taking toys to school? What do you need to think about? And she'd go, I don't know, Mum. And I'd say, okay, let's think about it. What can happen to your toy? Could get lost, could get stolen, could get dirty, could get broken. If any of those 4 things happen, what are the rules about if they happen? Rule number 1, you made the decision to take it, so Mum does not want to hear about it. Rule number two, Mum is not buying you another one. So knowing that I don't want to hear about it and I don't want to buy you another one, and you know how much you love your Cabbage Patch doll, what can happen to it? Are you happy to live with the consequences of it? So she sat back, little Amelia with this blonde hair and these big blue eyes. She sat back.
How old was she at this point?
Probably about 4 and a half.
Okay. Got the picture.
She disappeared. She came back out. What have you decided, Amelia? I'm taking this McDonald's McDonald's toy to school instead, Mum. I don't care if it gets broken. I don't care if it gets stolen. I don't care if I lose pieces. And I know you're not going to buy me another one. And I know that you don't want to hear about it.
Wow. At 4 years old, that's amazing, Lisa.
4 years old. Look, it took a long time because she had to lose a couple of toys. She had to get a couple of toys dirty and broken. She had to raise stuff with me where I went, honey, your decision. I chose not to create this yes-no environment for my kids because, first of all, my husband was always a no person and I'm not. And life is not yes and no. Life is not black and white. Life is shades of gray. So when it comes to decision-making, having a great decision-making model and variables around decision-making is really important, regardless of whether you're dealing with a 4-year-old or whether you're dealing with some of those children on boards. And
I was going to say that some of those are 4-year-old C-suite people.
4-year-old C-suites, right? So you kind of stand back from it and you go, I know you really want this toy, or you really want to buy this property, but here's our strategy. And our strategy says that for us to be able to deliver on the strategy, there are certain variables. Let's have a look at our decision-making model around how we make great decisions and whether the answer is this property or something else. Is the answer taking the Cabbage Patch, or is it something else? We build great decision-making environments by building a really great reusable framework around how to make decisions, Chris. That's the reality of it. That's how we do it. And that's how we do it really well. Sometimes there's pushback because, again, a lot of people think this governance stuff is all bullshit. Even from a personal standpoint, having your own rationale for how you make decisions will really hold you in good stead. Because if you've got a really great, consistent way around how you assess and make decisions in your role or in your home or in your environment, and there's usability around it, as long as you're coming from a really great place and you understand how and where those lines are of what you can decide and what you can't, you won't actually go wrong. You might make the wrong decision, but you'll also learn from it and re-inform your model around how you make decisions in the future.
Yes, I love that. I love that. So speaking of that, do you have some frameworks of problem solving ways that you go about? I know for me, SWOT analysis was always a really good one, but do you have other ones that you use with your clients?
Look, I do. Sometimes I find that my clients don't really see the difference between what an issue is and what a risk is. Because they get so caught up in the emotional aspects of the issue. Oh, it's this and that and this and that's going to happen. And then they kind of forward scope all the wrong and badness, and it turns into this really big drama cycle. You've heard of the drama cycle before, where they become the victim and there's always a villain and they're always waiting for someone to come in and save the day. What I really like to use is more of a coaching approach around it, where we're recognizing that, first of all, the person or the individual that's actually having this dynamic or having this challenge or issue around decision making can take a slightly different perspective around it, because it's one of those things where, in my experience, we forget our perspective isn't the only perspective.
Yeah.
And so when we stand back, one of the models I love to use the most is to say, okay, what is the issue? Let's just get to the real crux of it. In one sentence, what's the actual issue? What are the risks associated with the issue? Why is it keeping you awake at night? What are you really worried about? And what are the true risks? And what's the likelihood and consequence of these risks occurring?
Right.
Let's be real about it, because sometimes, in fact, a lot of the time, our imaginations run pretty wild, right? Especially if we're a little bit of, got a bit of an anxiety thing going on. We get taken away too heavily by what the risks are, and realistically, whether they're real risks or not. And so as part of that process, I love to get other stakeholders in to support getting perspective around, will that really happen? Will that happened once 25 years ago. Are we really going to still worry about that now? Or did it really happen this week or this month or this year? Or has it ever happened ever? And then on top of that, start focusing on the ideal outcome. What is it that we want to happen? What is it that we want to do? Because in a lot of these cases, when you do issue, risk, outcome, we tend to be very heavily focused on what's happened in the past and not what's actually being put in front of us and the opportunity in the future.
Right.
And it comes back to that same concept, Chris, of how much time do you spend looking through the rearview mirror and how much time do you spend looking through the windscreen? And you and I both know, in fact, everyone knows, that the rearview mirror is quite small and the windscreen is quite large. And we can't drive while looking back. So we can only drive while we're facing forward. So the model I like to use is issue, risk, outcome, and then I reframe our conversation around getting really clear about what the ideal outcome is, to recognize whether the issue is really an issue and whether the risks are actually as risky as they are. So when we define that outcome, we can then work out what we're going to do about it. But we're doing about it and coming from a place that's realistic, it's rational, and it's also, dare I say, recognizing that we're facing forward to deal with it, as opposed to looking through that rearview mirror, trying to drive forward at the same time. because that's where people get stuck. They get stuck looking backwards and past experiences and looking forward. So that's a model I like to use, and it seems to generate quite a lot of conversation and discussion and rebalancing around our focus. Does that kind of land?
No, I love it. I love it. Straight to the point. And it's really getting clear on defining the problem. I mean, one of the biggest situations that I would run into in corporate life was we would talk about the symptom of a problem, but we would never actually talk about the root of the problem. So with my staff and with what we did in the management meetings was really like drill down to get clear, get focused on what is the underlying problem, what's the underlying situation, and then be able to tackle that, because that would then solve for so many other situations invariably. One of the things that I find that I'm hearing from my friends that are still in corporate is especially in this post-pandemic world, is relationships, right? Coworker relationships. You got people who are mask advocates. You got people who can't stand the mask. You got people pro-vax, anti-vax, pro-Trump, anti-Trump. I mean, especially here in the United States.
Yeah.
And people are finding, my manager friends are finding, like, to be able to mitigate some of these relationship issues between staff and between themselves as managers in this new type of world. People are sitting there coming to work saying, I'm not going to come to the office anymore. I was way more productive at home. Why are you making me do this? I have to deal with so-and-so person. That person doesn't want me to be around them unless I'm wearing a mask. All those relationship situations. What are some critical success points that you might have for people to better foster those relationships in these delicate times?
Look, another really great question. And it's something I'm actually finding more and more are really landing right now and getting to the crux of dealing with this, because it's been a little while now, right? I don't know about yourselves, but we've kind of been out of lockdown for a good year and a bit now, and these things are still playing out. There's still that angst. There's still this undercurrent and angst around all of this pandemic and post-pandemic stuff. People are carrying a lot from that past experience into where we are now, right?
It's real trauma.
So what I'm finding for a lot of organizations and a lot of leaders is that they're actually going back to their organization's values and behaviors. So a lot of organizations have these things on the wall that say, these are our values, this is what we value, and this is how we behave to deliver against our values. And what they're actually realizing for a lot of them, especially for those that are speaking to me, is that as part of your agreement and your arrangement to be an employee in your organization, you will align your values and behaviors to the organization's as part of your terms and conditions of working there.
How does that go over?
Well, this is the interesting part, okay? So for some organizations, they build these really amazing high-level values and behaviors. Not even the owners or the leaders of the business are even delivering on them, but they'll use it as a big stick to hit people over the head with them.
Yep.
And so all of a sudden, and they call someone like me, and I'm like, well, are these values and behaviors being lived now? Well, not really. When you put these kinds of frameworks in place, and it's a governance framework, right? It's actually it's defining lines of accountability around behavior. And so I stand back and I say, well, these types of frameworks, again, you don't get to put it in once and forget about it because it doesn't work and it pisses everyone off. We need to actually do a couple of things with this stuff. First of all, yawn, right? We need to actually keep this framework alive. And the way we do it is we review them and go, are these realistic? Because the owners decided that be kind is a value 15 years ago, but we never really talked about what kindness is, and the leaders are not exactly kind here anyway. So, let's be really clear about it. And so these types of things are in place with the very best intentions, but it also means that we need to make them useful for us. So I have been spending quite a bit of time realigning what does it mean to work here, and what does it mean, and how should we be treating each other? What it means as well, Chris, to be quite frank with you, is that organizations should have these values and behaviors ideally in place whenever they're recruiting people. So they actually recruit people that actually have the same values and behaviors. Because if the values are here, if the values are here and they're hiring people down here, there's always going to be this gap.
Yep.
And if you've got to actually leave your personal behaviors and values at the door every day and take on the organization's one and look at the gap, what is there? Misalignment. There's misalignment, Chris. And so those environments where, there's the mask wearers and the non-mask wearers, and those who wear masks shouldn't be judging those that aren't, and those who aren't shouldn't be judging those who are.
Agreed.
Because we're here to do a job, and from a professionalism standpoint, each to their own, right? Is it getting in the way of me delivering outcomes? Is it getting in the way of making decisions? Is it getting in the way of me doing my work? Is it getting in the way of them doing their work? Am I accountable for them delivering? If the answer to all those things are no, 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 there needs to be, in my personal experience, some real conversations around what is an area of concern for you and what is not an area of your concern. And let's talk about where these behaviors really need to be realigned around what we expect from you as professionals who are being paid to do a job in this organization.
Mm-hmm.
Hard conversations, Chris, not easy conversations, but there's a whole lot of misalignment around it right now, and I'm seeing it post-pandemic. I'm seeing it everywhere. But it reminds me that the values and behaviors is one of those things that tend to be set and left. And it's actually a tool for leaders, and it's actually a tool for staff members as well to say, hey, one of our values is integrity.
Mm-hmm.
One of our values is to take care of each other. And I'm wearing this mask today because I've got a little bit of a sore throat. I don't have COVID. I don't know what it is, but because I care about you and your well-being, I'm wearing this mask. People aren't always wearing masks because they don't trust everyone else. They're perhaps doing it to actually protect others from themselves.
That's the way I looked at it.
So it's one of those things where, again, having those real conversations and realigning is really, really important.
Mm-hmm. And getting the staff involved in that, because the thing I found, again, having such a large staff, is they would complain about what the company was doing, and I didn't necessarily have the authority or the input to necessarily change all that. But in my own little company, I used to call it my own little company, is I got them involved. We created a mission statement, a vision statement. We aligned, we decided what our values were as an operations group. And so when we would be talking about things, whether it was related to the customer, the external customer, or the internal customer, does it align with our core values that all of us together as a team had input on? So we would go, I would spend a lot of time on this. My manager, my boss was like, Chris, you're spending too much time on this, for line staff, for warehouse staff and mail staff. I'm like, no. These guys are the backbone of what's going on here. And they're the ones that are touching the customer first. The CEO's not touching the customer. These guys are touching the customer. So what is it that we can do? And so when we got that alignment, we got the values in place, and everybody agreed on and had them sign off on it. I had them all do it at an all employee meeting. So we all presented everything. So they all felt empowered and everything. So again, they had to answer their own questions by sitting there saying, okay, is this to align with the values? And then also, as far as the relationship situation was going, I taught my staff, I said, the number one relationship rule is seek first to understand, then to be understood. And over the course of so many years, I had a lot of people that were there for 10, 15, 20 years, being able to implement that, not only in their professional lives, but in their personal lives, found them so much greater success and inner confidence to be able to address some situations like that. One of the other things that I've been thinking about, wanted to talk to you about, is all these studies, and all of a sudden I'm just hearing about Chat GBT or whatever the hell it is. I finally got to see what it was. It's pretty incredible, but when you're hearing, but I just heard an alarming statistic the other day. I can't remember who quoted it. I heard it on the news, and it was talking about that they said by, I think it was 2035, that about 40% of current staff and occupations are going to be replaced by AI and robotics. Talk to us about that conversation with C-suite leaders, and let us know, what is that realistic, and what can we start doing as employees ourselves to start preparing for that shift in what's going to be happening with the technology and everything.
Look, really, 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 really great. And can I just tell you, your example and your story around that co-creation piece with your team, incredible investment, foundational investment in your team and how they're moving forward. This whole IA piece, the AI piece, is a really interesting piece from where I'm sitting, because there's this expectation or this perception that the more human computers get, the less we need humans. And I kind of stand back from it, and I think, well, it's, we aren't robots. And look, as a governance purist, it'd be really nice if we all were, because we can put those lines in the computers, and computers know what a hard control is and what a soft control is. Soft controls are relying on people. Hard controls are relying on systems. And so those hard controls are beautiful, because guess what? You cannot get past it until you actually satisfy that need from that hard control. And an example of that is, when you fill out a form on a website, or you're doing online shopping, and you've got a field, it's got the asterisk, the must complete. Yeah. You must put your date of birth in, or whatever it is. That is a hard control that you cannot get past to move to the next stage of the process. And so it's nice to have these things in organizations where you cannot pass go, because humans find ways to get around things.
Oh, yeah.
right? It's kind of like, you write a policy on something. Here are some principles around how we're doing things around here in a certain area, and individuals will look at those principles and apply them, based on their knowledge, their skills, and their experience, and whether or not they want to comply or not. Because principles-based policy rely on them in using their judgment, whereas black and white rules are black or white. Yes, you can,
Right.
or you can't. The computer environment and the AI piece loves the black and the white. What they're doing right now is they're educating technology to navigate through shades of grey.
It's frightening.
And it learns and it grows and it learns and it grows and it learns and it grows. Every time it gets a new piece of data, it actually interprets based on whether it's occurred before and what component of that could potentially be reused and what can we learn. And it will actually ask for human interventions at certain intervals and at certain points. It's interesting because while there's fear around it, there's also opportunity around it.
Right. As with anything.
And what I'm finding at the moment, like yourself, is that there's a lot of talk about it and there's a lot of the statistics out there saying, 40% of jobs will no longer be required in companies. They're not saying which 40%.
Right.
And they're also not talking about the 60% of new jobs that haven't even been thought about or invented yet. Mm-hmm. And for me, I kind of sit back and go, well, it could end up meaning that my skill set is no longer required. I don't know. But I have a continual learning, growing mindset. I am just like AI. Mm-hmm. And so for those of us, or for those of you out there that are concerned about this, alarming sort of situation with AI, provided that you are a human that's learning and growing, you will always find a way to be able to provide value. You'll always be able to find your place and your space in this world to be able to deliver what you're passionate about, provided you're always learning and growing. As soon as you get stuck, as soon as you go, I'm one of the 40%, and just look at it from a negative standpoint and be quite fixed in your thinking, whatever you believe, you'll achieve.
So true.
And so I'm sure you share that quite regularly through your processes, Chris. Whatever you believe, you achieve. Mm-hmm. So the more you believe that I am a human that is going to, make the best decisions I can, I'm going to learn, I'm going to grow, I'm going to fail, but I'm going to learn from the failure. I'm going to pick myself up and I'm going to keep moving forward. You will always naturally be doing what AI does, and you'll naturally be able to position yourself where you need to be.
Yes. I love that, Lisa. It's amazing. I mean, it's so true. I mean, when I think about my evolution, getting into the workplace at such a young age, I was in there 17 years old. It's pretty incredible. What I just kept trying to do was like find what the problem was and find how I could become the solution for that, or how I could take that off somebody else's hands. And so you're right, with the new AI, who's gonna manufacture the robots, who's gonna work on the robots, who's gonna program the AI, there's all sorts of different opportunities for people if they just have that open consciousness, instead of like, oh my God, what's going to happen? What am I going to do? And then they just sit by and wait for it to happen. Then they sit there and play the victim role. Like, oh my God, I didn't know it. It's pretty ridiculous. We have to take responsibility upon ourselves to go back into school. So many people want to quit school after high school. Like, I'm not going back to school again. Well, don't be surprised if you find yourself in a situation where you're not making any money. You become redundant or anything else like that. You have to be an advocate for your own career success, whether you're an entrepreneur or you work in a corporate environment. We have to be responsible for ourselves to take that ownership and take that proactivity in ourselves to see what's coming next and see what it is that we want to do. Or like you and I did, sit there and say, okay, we don't want to do that shit anymore. We're going to go and do our own thing, which has its own problems and its own set of circumstances that we have to deal with and face, independent contractors and whatnot. But
yeah, absolutely. And I think we need to keep in mind too that there's a difference between thinking and doing.
Oh yeah. That's why it's called thinking.
Yeah, exactly right. So there's thinking and then there's doing. And even from the AI context and the AI perspective, my understanding of it right now is that it's doing a hell of a lot of thinking and it's providing a hell of a lot of advice. And yes, it's starting to do some doing, but the level of, automation and the level of technology and the level of change that we need for AI to be able to do everything we do as humans, but that's actually at a very, very different level than what they're really talking about right now.
Of course, yeah. They're just giving a little myopic picture.
Well, it's like, oh, it's great. They can look at all of my past posts on LinkedIn and create new posts for me based on the topic I'm writing about. Well, that's really fantastic. That saves me, 2.5 hours a week. But that's a small aspect of what Lisa does. and who Lisa is.
Right.
And so I think it's one of those things where, again, it's about that perspective and that context that we really need to keep in mind and not make it any bigger than it needs to be. So we'll have to wait and see what the future holds, Chris. Hey?
So true, Lisa. Oh my God, we've been talking for almost an hour.
Wow.
I could sit here and talk to you for another couple of hours on this stuff. I somewhat miss my leadership role and being in corporate. Sometimes I do miss that in team building and everything else. But with the state of the situation now and leadership and everything else, I'm much rather be on this side of the fence and dealing with these things. Where can people get a hold of you to continue the conversation? Where can they learn more about you and be able to implement some of these things for themselves?
Well, there's a couple of different ways you can reach out. Obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously, you're very welcome to jump on and find me on LinkedIn. There are a couple of Lisa Colettas there, but I'm Lisa Coletta, the founder of the Governance Collective. Love to hear from you. Send me a message through LinkedIn. That'd be fantastic. If you're interested in having some one-on-one time with me, my website has currently got a complimentary 1 hour offering for a free consultation with me. If you'd like to talk a little bit further, so feel free to do that. You can see my website address on your screen right now. Thank you for putting that up there, Chris. That's really lovely of you.
Do you want to just spell it out for people so people listening on the audio podcast?
Yep, no problem. It's www.governanccollective.com.au. And that is governance, not government. I get that quite a bit, the whole governance thing, www.governanccollective.com.au. And I would love to hear from any of your listeners, Chris. Please reach out if you'd like to continue this conversation. Yes.
And they can get a hold of you by email as well?
Email, absolutely. Lisa@governanccollective.com.au. Please reach out. Love to chat.
Yes. Do it, ladies and gentlemen. When these opportunities arise, you have to take these opportunities and run with them and become the person in your competition. You want to be the one with the most answers. So take up Lisa on her offer and go there and go forth and be responsible for your careers and your lives. I'm going to put you backstage, Lisa, for just a second. Don't go anywhere because I still want to chat with you. And I'm just going to end out the show in just a few moments. Thank you. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here and enjoying this conversation. I'm going to go back and I saw there was a couple of comments here. I just want to go back and just highlight and just say thank you guys all for being here. Nicole Young. Yeah. I definitely, she says here, she goes, our strength, our biggest strength can also be our weakness. Absolutely. 100%. I tend to be very verbose and very opinionated. And sometimes that could be my greatest weakness. Let's see. We got stuff on the back. Sciatica has been acting up. We got everybody's sympathizing with my back pain here. Robert says here, many things can be said when a smile or a grin is also in place. Absolutely. I'm not sure what this relates to, but Natalie says, oh my fucking God. Oh, what? Yeah, oh my fucking God. I'm literally nuts and it's official. Okay. Well, that's good. I appreciate that. And Robert says here, welcome to the club, Natalie. I like it here. Yeah, I think Robert's the president. We got Jacqueline Rose in the house. Thank you for being here as well. We got LinkedIn user. I think this is somebody we know, Lisa. Says, hello, Lisa and Christopher with a purple heart. Well, thank you, LinkedIn user. Unfortunately, your name isn't coming over, but thank you for being here with us. I want to capture this comment here. I'm not sure. It's a big one. So we'll put it on the screen. I don't know if you'll be able to show up. Natalie says, I am dealing with the fight of my life, trying to prove that my PTSD was real and the constant increased violence at work triggered me to disassociate and to protect and defend the victim. But I know in time the story will be told because I am still waiting and fighting and did so much investigation that I solved the problem myself. As always, I had to do it anyways. Don't want to cause issues at the moment, but in time, I guarantee you nothing happens. Nothing happens for a reason. Is this a sign? Yeah, it's absolutely a sign. It's a sign that you're taking responsibility and you're going after it and you're making things happen. And appreciate you sharing that with us. And Patricia says here, Lisa is filled with wisdom. I love this. So thank you, Patricia, for being here. Appreciate you. Can't wait to be doing this with you here in a couple of months. We're talking about sleep here. We got Robert in the house. Robert, I'm always going to get back to your comments as well. And let's see if there's any other ones in here. Yeah, Natalie says here, common human decency don't exist now. Imagine I need people. I think common decency actually does exist, Natalie. I think it's depending on who it is that you're associating with, but I think there is always opportunity for growth in that perspective. But the thing I want you guys to take from this conversation tonight is responsibility. It's upon ourselves to take responsibility for our education, for our growth, for how we interact with others, and also the fact that we need to be honest with our leaders, whether it's in the corporate environment, whether it's in our school environment, whatever it might be. We have to be honest with people. We have to sit there and let them know exactly what's going on. If somebody asks us our opinion and we don't tell them the truth, then how can we expect things to change? Right. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to, especially in this changing dynamic world of the workplace and what's coming next, that you are proactive in your education and your responsibility, what it is that you want to do, because life is short. And if there's something that's been a burning passion in your life and you've always been thinking, someday I'm going to do this, one day I'm going to do this, ask yourself, where is one day or where is someday on a calendar? Wherever you're at in your age journey, life goes by pretty fast. So if there's something out there that inspires you to go out there and start your own business, go do that. And there's so much resources out there. I mean, the internet is an amazing opportunity for you to go out there, figure out what to do. There's Canva now. I mean, there's so many different opportunities and tools for you to start and launch a business. Go after that. If you don't like the corporate world, don't go after that either. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's incumbent upon us to take these solutions and take these opportunities back to our employers and sit there and say, hey, listen, I just saw this discussion the other night and they were talking about these things and going in about doing governance and alignment and values and things of that nature. Put it in your company suggestion box and put Lisa's name on there. Just because she's in Australia doesn't mean she can't do things here in the United States or Canada. I know we're in 10 different countries right now. So it could be Guam or not Guam. That's not a country. I was trying to think of 2 different places at once. We're all over the place. India, Japan, UK, Australia, Canada, Japan, Taiwan. We're in all sorts of different places. So whatever it is that you can do in your area, go implement these and be a part of the solution, not be a part of the problem. So thank you guys for being here. And as always, if you are watching this on the video cast, please consider going and subscribing to the audio podcast, supporting us there. And then also, if there's any ideas or suggestions for guests or topics that you would like me to have here on the show, please send me an email. You guys can send it to me at christopher@christopherrausch.com. You guys follow me on social media. You can send me a private message there. Let me know what types of guests and what types of conversations. Somebody had asked about this. They said they wanted more business conversations here on the show. So that's why we brought Lisa in on the show. We've got a couple of more of those guests coming up for you because that's what you asked for. So I appreciate you guys. I love you guys so much. Let me know what I can do for the show to make it a little bit better for you. And I promise we're going to continue doing this every week until we all get it, which could take a lifetime. Love you guys. This is Raw and Unscripted. I'm Christopher Rausch. Go out and have a brilliant day, brilliant evening, and a brilliant afternoon. Love you guys. Bye.